Hello viewers, this week's Daily Race C takes us to Monza in Group 3 for a 10-lap race. 1 times tyre wear, 1 times fuel, which on the surface looks pretty dull and pretty boring. However, after the recent BOP changes in the game, the balance between the different cars is actually not too bad. And therefore what you're going to see in this video is that you can actually race in a fair amount of different cars. And this race turned out to be one that I enjoy quite a lot. Now, yes, you are going to see a lot of the Toyota Supra. In fact, I'm driving it right now. But you're also going to see a fair few different options that can be driven to a decent result. Now, unfortunately on this first race, we got a half-second penalty. The main pitfall of this race was penalties, especially through that chicane that I just got one on. And that made this race supremely difficult to complete without making a mistake. It was a very difficult circuit. Not only that, we've got some of the fastest players in the world in this lobby. I mean, Josetti there, who just went past, is a world champion, in fact a multiple world champion on Gran Turismo, and therefore we're in very well esteemed company in this race. So getting a good result here would not be easy at all. We find ourselves now in 8th place, up behind the Alfa Romeo of all cars. A very interesting choice, and it's certainly not a car you would have picked to drive around Monza before the BOP change. Anyway, up behind the Supra here, who made a mistake coming out of turn 1. I don't know if it was a mistake or if it got run wide, but we're going to capitalise into the second chicane here and move up into 7th place. As I touched upon just now, it really is about avoiding those damn penalties, especially through that second chicane that we just went through. But there are quite a lot of points on the track where you can easily get a half-second or a 1-second penalty, and that's what you really need to avoid in this race. It was really an interesting one because people going for different strategies, but the different car choices was something that I was quite enjoying. In fact, the guy behind me at this point here was in the Mitsubishi Evo as 3rd place, as we just slow it down there, goes over the chicane, gets teleported back in time, and we're going to gain another position. So pretty much as we alluded to earlier, it really is about survival here at Monza. Very difficult track to get right without making any mistakes. You can see on the brakes I was pretty good up against the Shadow 977 up in front in the Alfa Romeo, and therefore I sensed there was maybe an opportunity here of moving up a position. It wasn't too quick on that lap around the second chicane either. We do have the Mitsubishi Evo just behind, and that's another car that I just would not have considered for this race not long ago before the BOP change. But the Evo actually seems to be a very viable option for this race, which is actually just quite cool to see. Now as we head through the Ascari chicane, shifting up to 4th gear, riding the bumps, and the car does feel a little bit loose through there, but we're just beginning to build up to a potential overtake here as we overtake the Frenchman who's serving a penalty in the Porsche, and therefore we're going to move up into 3rd, what could be 2nd if we can get very close here on the exit of Parabolica here on lap number 5. Halfway into this race, the pace has been pretty good, well into the 49s every lap. I go defensive here to cover against the Evo, and I kind of innocuously go for a move up the inside. We go side by side through the chicane, and then it's a drag race on the exit between myself and the Alfa. We are going to have Curva Grande in our favour, the right-hander here, and a small bump draft from the Mitsubishi Evo behind. And therefore, after all of that, moving up into 2nd, I must be honest, at the beginning of the race, once we had that penalty, after starting 9th and then losing a position immediately to the Ford Mustang, I was thinking this is going to be a very difficult race and it's not going to be easy to even finish inside the top 10. Such was the level of talent in the lobby and the difficulty of the race. However, we find ourselves now in 2nd with this Mitsubishi Evo behind, who wants to cooperate and was not going to go for the overtake there. I do sense that the Evo perhaps doesn't have the straight line speed of the Supra, but that's pretty much always going to be the case, and therefore he was quite willing to sit in the slipstream. That was until this lap, where he had a very strong slipstream down the main straight, went for the move into turn 1. I didn't really fight it because we are still racing many of the other cars behind, because we have not yet pitted. Have to do one pit stop in the race. And so I thought, okay, let's sit behind. As you can probably tell, this Evo was very, very planted and had really good acceleration. There's absolutely no question that it was really difficult to keep up with this guy on the exit of the corners. Look at that, it just opens up a tenth or two, leaving the corner. And even down the main straight, I've got a bit of slipstream here. I wasn't gaining a huge amount, maybe 2-3 tenths. I suppose that is a big amount, but maybe not as much as I thought it would be. So yeah, the Evo there, definitely an option, definitely a contender in this race, and it's good to see it being used. I mean, it's a very rare choice in Group 3. I was looking for this potential move here at the beginning of lap number 9, wasn't quite close enough to really go for it, so just having to remain behind for the time being. But I must say that the lap times here were pretty good, well inside the 49s for pretty much all of the laps, a 49.0 on lap number 8, somewhat slipstream assisted of course. But we are going to bring the car into the pit lane here, move to the right hand side. You do have to do one pit stop. Such was the lack of tyre wear and the lack of fuel use that you didn't actually have to change your tyres or refuel the car, and therefore the pit stop boys there pretty much have a redundant job of just standing about doing nothing. As we leave the pit lane, I've actually had a good race here. I'm in 5th position, in a clear 5th, maybe could get a 4th if I could re-overtake the Mitsubishi Evo. But after all of that, it just shows you having some nice consistent laps in this race, penalty free, will go a long way, and therefore well into the top 5 in a very high quality lobby. Starting 9th, I will certainly take that. Now, I say about not getting penalties, I did get one here, only half a second on the final lap, and therefore I was able to finish in 5th place, which was a very satisfying result. We're going to move on to the next race, and I had to actually buy the Mitsubishi Evo. I had not yet driven this car in the game other than in the circuit experience, but I thought I'd give it a go. It was clearly a decent car for this race. I capped it off really by going and getting a penalty within the first corner of the race by cutting the first turn, which was not ideal. So losing a position here quite early doors, just trying to work out this car, how it performs. Now, as we touched upon earlier, it has really supreme acceleration and handling, I'd say. It does have a bit of a tendency to oversteer when you get on the power too quickly, but once you learn to drive around that issue, then actually it was actually very good. It was quite solid through the chicane actually, until this lap where I just drove a little bit wide, pushing a little bit too hard on the exit. As you can see, all 4 wheels onto the AstroTurf is not an ideal line, and therefore I had a very solid 4th at that time, and now dropping positions down to 7th. Rossetti coming through from the back of the pack in the GT500, so another car there that can be possibly used for this race to good effect, and we actually have a Lexus in front as well. So a very close call on the pit lane entry. Well, I'm actually about to make a cataclysmic error. I tried this move, and it was quite a sneaky little move to try to go up the inside here, but there was just just not enough width basically. The car on my left couldn't move left because he would cross the pit lane exit line, and therefore I just kind of put myself in a precarious position and was asking for trouble, and that trouble well and truly arrived, as you can see, finishing this one in 15th out of 16, a complete disaster of a race. The car definitely has potential. It was more just driver skill or lack thereof, and that continued into the second race. And you know, when you're facing the wall like this, you know you've messed up quite drastically. With a clear lack of emotion on my face, it was quite clear that I had to move over to Scott Speed. This is the GOAT, and this is the GOAT livery. Take a look at this. Taylor Swift. I mean, many of her. Need for Swift. Look at that. I mean, it's going to be an unbeatable car. There's nothing that anyone can do really to beat this thing. I mean, there's 7 of her on the front bonnet. And so logging on to Scott Speed on the American server with a Taylor Swift livery, this is going to be a good race. but I fear the result was inevitable with such an OP car setup. Anyway, another car you could use is the Nissan GT500, the car in front, and you see the Lexus behind actually gets a very good launch, and so we had to protect the inside here into turn number 1, lap number 1. And so just to touch upon the point I made at the beginning of the video, it was really pleasing to see a good range of cars being used for this. Yes, the Supra is the more dominant choice in this race, there's no question about that, and it is the car that is dominating the leaderboard, at least has most of the top times. But as far as race pace goes, it seems as though there are some different options, and that was really good to see, because it has been an issue in the game recently, certainly in Group 4 where we had the Mazda 3 dominating the lobbies, and in Group 3, I mean, we are still always going to have dominant cars, there's no question about that. I think it's really hard to engineer that out of the game. Even if you get it right on one track, it's not quite going to work on another track, depending on how many straights there are, how many corners there are, how many sharp corners there are, etc. It's always going to be different. Therefore, it's going to be really difficult for Polyphony to truly engineer that out of the game. But I think how it is now is better than it was, let's say, before the update, the recent update about a week or so ago or 2 weeks ago. And so it's quite pleasing to have a good range of cars here. The Nissan GT500 in front appeared to have really good drive out of the corners. In fact, it was a really good car overall. I would say the weakness of it may be the brakes and perhaps stability over curbs, but overall it seemed to be driven very well. Windfire in front is, I believe it's Kevin Powder, who is a Gran Turismo world finalist, very, very accomplished and fast driver, and therefore I'm rather happy to be keeping up. It's interesting to know the exact difference between the Supra and the car he is driving. I don't know which one is quicker overall, really. I mean, the Supra probably would edge it, and let's say if we were driving the cars the other way around, if I was in his car and he in mine, then he probably would be moving clear. But on this occasion, these are the cars we're driving, and I managed to keep up, managing to stay in the slipstream range. You might have noticed through that second chicane he had a bit of a moment, and that kind of is a precursor to the events later on, because I was just trying to establish a weakness of his car. He was driving, for the most part, extremely consistently, what you'd expect from a World Tour level player, just very consistent, doesn't really make any mistakes, just keeps driving metronomically. I was the one making the mistakes. Every time I would get close, especially into the Parabolica, any corner where you had to accelerate quite hard while still turning seemed to prove to be an issue, especially well into the slipstream range. Not having to worry too much about the cars behind, about 3 seconds to the guy in third place, who is Hellsfire, actually another Gran Turismo World Tour level player. So I've got to say, in this race, this Monza race, I was actually very happy with my level of performance, as perhaps shows that in different conditions I can drive quite well. In a low tyre wear, low fuel race, my pace is actually pretty good, but once you start having to preserve tyres, maybe that's something I could definitely improve upon compared to the absolute best players on this game. So you can see here, lap number 5, and it's not really much of a different situation. You really did have to build up to an overtake, I sensed, around this track. You'd think that Monza would actually be a very easy track to overtake on, given the long straights, big braking zones into sharp corners. However, I think over the course of these races, a lot of the overtakes were being done because of penalties, and maybe because of the pit lane strategy, jumping into the pit a bit earlier than someone else. But to complete a genuine on-track overtake, it actually required quite a lot of effort. Like up against someone who was roughly the same pace as you, you really did have to get quite a lot of consecutive corners a bit better than the car in front. So here you see, closing up on the way in, but that GT500 just has really good drive on the exits of the corners, even down the main straight. With the slipstream here, I'm not really gaining that much, and therefore on the brakes into turn 1, lap number 6, not able to go for the move. I mean, from that far back it would have been an absolutely disastrous dive bomb, and therefore I don't want to ruin both our races. End of lap number 6 though, let's take a look. Goes a little bit wide there, gain a kart length or so through the corner, but on the exit, once again having big issues, and we've turned the Taylor Swift car into a Taylor Drift car, because that was absolutely mega control. I mean, we're not trying to drift, but it was a nice drift, so I'll take it. End of lap 7, I've caught up once again. I feel like I'm growing into the race and just really trying to put the pressure on. But he's done World Tour level stuff. He's probably not fazed by the pressure all that much when he's in the comfort of his own home. Playing online, playing in a LAN event is another matter. There's a lot more pressure on that, I would have supposed. But every time he's looking in that rear view mirror, he is seeing 7 Taylor Swifts and Scotch Egg bearing down upon him, and therefore that must have some sort of effect, you would have thought. Now, I made a big mistake here, just running a little bit too wide on the exit of Lesmo 2. The gap at quite a crucial time here, going up to about 8/10. However, on the brakes into turn 1, lap number 9, really late on the brakes, really taking quite a lot of risk with the penalties there. But I felt like, well, I've got 3.5 seconds behind, I might as well just risk it a bit more now, try to catch up. I gained 2/10 in the first chicane alone there. Into the second chicane, I'm about to gain quite a few more tenths for a very simple reason, and that reason being, he continues to turn right on the exit of the corner. As you can see, that's a pretty horrible angle to be at, and he proceeds to drift out and hand me first place on the penultimate lap. And so after all of that, it turned out to be a mistake, as I kind of alluded to, that hands me the race lead. I suppose I had to be close enough to capitalise, and therefore just being within the slipstream range certainly helped. Swift Army is inevitable. And yes, it was absolutely inevitable that the Taylor Swift machine would catch up and win the race. All I had to do was pit, make sure I did not cut the pit exit line or make any drastic mistakes from here to the end on this final lap. And thankfully, that is what happened. Through here, just took it really easy to spin the car out on that corner. And so after 10 laps of pressure and difficult racing, we're finally going to come through to win a race around Monza. We've done it, guys. Miracles do happen, mate. Get in there, Lewis. Come on. Get in there, Lewis. So one simple trick to winning. Download the Taylor Swift livery. It's as easy as that.